Hey there, Goblin Fellowship. This is the Goblin King, and as promised, I've brought an enema. An enema for the pop culture and mainstream media slags which seek to infiltrate, subvert, pervert, and destroy the things that we all love. It's a giant enema, too, as these bowel blockages which call themselves journalists, scholars, experts, and even fans seem to be particularly stubborn and resistant to getting the fuck out. Of course, no enema of any size can remove their own bowel blockages, that being their own heads, of course. The particular blockage I'm speaking of this evening has me once again wading out into the bloodied waters of the Belagair to righteously defend the Lord of the Rings fandom from the cultural vandals which would slander and defame anyone opposed to the gross changes Amazon wants to bring to the beloved works of Tolkien. This blockage even has a name. Its name is Andrew Blair. Supposedly he's a Scotsman, though I see no evidence of this, as he seems to lack testicles. Any man who unironically writes poetry of any kind about Robert Pattinson needs to give up their man card. So, this festering anal blockage, Andrew Blair, wrote an article on Den of Geek about the Rings of Power and why fandom has to embrace change. Before I go any further into that, I have to state that I found this vomit-encrusted tripe through this article, posted today, by Bounding into Comics. Bounding goes through specific pieces of Andrew Blair's article and refutes these points, and even includes that video Gary made about this very article, which I also watched. Now that's out of the way, let's dive a little bit more into Blair's lunatic ravings, shall we? Let's start right at the beginning, where he starts his entire argument off with a false premise. Much like with the essay that Brightwatt Earl did over on theonering.net, he starts this off with an outright lie, attributing the fan backlash to this supposed idea that not everyone in the series is a white man, quote-unquote. I'll answer him in the same way I answered that other anal blockage with simply this: you're a lying liar who lies. There has been just as much backlash about cast members that are white as the ones that were not. Galadriel's character has been lambasted up, down, and sideways by those who know far more about the character than I do. As I've stated multiple times now, I only read the books once, over 20 years ago, so everything I know about Galadriel comes from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, books and movies. Not only that, but the character of Elrond has received just as much flack as anyone else. Then you have the two hobbits that have been featured so far, because hobbits didn't fucking exist in the time period the show is claiming it's set in. As well, I just did a video yesterday talking about two other characters that are rumored to appear in the show, which I'm going to go ahead and guess are probably white, and they're already getting backlash from the fans just based on these rumors and apparent leaks that have dropped. Why? Because they go directly against what was fucking written. However, far better fans than I have made their cases against these characters very vocally, and with the backing of far more knowledge and research on the subject than I've ever thought of putting into it. Do I love these books for what they are? Absolutely. Not only that, but I'm absolutely in awe of the work that Tolkien put into the crafting of this world. The man built up entire civilizations only for them to be torn down so that he could make his world that much richer, that much more real. I do world building. I know how much work goes into it. I've been working on a world for 20 years and still haven't gone into nearly as much depth as that man did. That's part of the reason why I respect his work so much. That's also the reason I'm fighting so hard against these utter pieces of shit who've never created a single thing in their pissant little lives, only gone on to destroy the works and worlds that other better people have created. Sorry, got a little heated there. He then goes on to make that tired-ass argument about adapting different mediums to film. We've all heard that dumbass argument. It's so fucking old and tired that I remember hearing it when I was a kid, and had objections to movies being different from the books I'd read. Peter Jackson's films stuck as close to Tolkien's original works as they possibly could. He even has that now famous quote where he talks about how they promised themselves they wouldn't stick any of their own personal politics or messages into the films. Blair and these other chodes championing this shit could take a lesson from Peter Jackson and the amazing box office numbers that his films generated globally. That means that his films, which stuck as close to the source material as possible, resonated with everyone across the globe. You fucking twat. As well, that entire argument has been proven over and over now to be null and void in this day and age of filmmaking, since that argument used to stem from a technical standpoint. There was just certain shit that a film couldn't do back in those days. Yet, with films like Peter Jackson's trilogy, like Watchmen, like, hell, Deadpool, It's been proven that you can very much stick to the source material and produce a damn fine film, and you usually do it pretty fucking good financially too. Why? Because you're keeping the core of your fanbase happy by sticking to what they know and just translating that to the big screen. He also inserts this little virtue signal here about how he was big mad as a teenager with Arwen's role in the Jackson films, but has since learned he was privileged and sexist. Which was also how I knew this man has no dick. Or, and I'll say this slowly, because you're obviously a slow one, you didn't like it because it deviated from the source material. You fucking ponce. After that, he brings up another tired-ass argument, calling Tolkien a racist and anti-Semite in his depictions of the dwarves. Gods, I get so tired of refuting these so-called talking points all the damn time. These fuckos are like broken fucking records. The dwarves, like so very much of Tolkien's works, were based upon Nordic and Germanic folklore. If you see a dwarf depicted on screen, or read a description of a dwarf in a book and think, gee, that sounds an awful lot like a Jewish person, I'm gonna go ahead and say you're a fucking bigot and that's a you problem. Not a problem with the material or the person who created it. Next thing you know, this racist twat is gonna go comparing orcs to black people. This next point was actually fucking golden in its extraordinary stupidity. He opens it by stating that The Lord of the Rings has always been co-opted by the far right, listing all the groups of bad people that like Tolkien's works, and stating that somehow indicative of the traditional Lord of the Rings fandom. He then cites several mass murderers and extremist groups that happen to enjoy Lord of the Rings. Hey, dipshit. I bet those people liked Coke too. Does that mean that everyone who likes Coke is a far-right fascist murderer? This is the exact same logic that has driven people to try to censor and change and ban various forms of media throughout the last century and more. This is the same line of thinking that drove the comic book hysteria in the 1950s, which drove the anti-D&D hysteria in the 80s, the video game hysteria in the 90s, and even now. Just because people who do bad things happen to like a particular thing doesn't mean it's indicative of every person or even a large percentage of the fandom of that thing. Oh, fascists like Lord of the Rings, so Lord of the Rings fans must be all fascist. It's such a huge straw man argument that they should use it for Burning Man. Also, have I mentioned that you're a twat? Then, right on cue, comes the same exact bullshit arguments about Ghostbusters 2016, an objectively bad movie and not what fans were promised, Disney Star Wars, Rey was a fucking Mary Sue, Kelly Marie Tran was bullied off the internet, something that to this day has never been proven, Leslie Jones getting harassed. Honestly, I have no idea about that, but regardless of whether or not that movie was bad or Leslie Jones isn't funny, nobody should be bullied, personally, for a film role. Then they try to talk about John Boyega, and all I have to say is, where are the receipts? I've never heard anyone say a bad thing about Finn outside of the fact that Ruin Johnson did him totally dirty in The Last Jedi. Finn was actually the most interesting character in The Force Awakens, and Ruin Johnson turned him into a lame-ass fucking joke. That's the type of stuff I've heard about John Boyega. Oh yeah, he also invokes Gamergate. Woo, scary. Also, yes Blair, people hate the media because you're a bunch of lying, divisive, opportunistic cunts. He closes out his fan hit piece by echoing the opening, unironically using the quote that he opened with in a sheer galaxy-brained move that shows his total and complete lack of self-awareness, as the site he's on literally destroys everything they touch. From Star Wars, to Star Trek, to Lord of the Rings, to Doctor Who, everything. Now, this chode goes on for, I'm going to go ahead and guess, about 2 pages, and never actually makes a point. He makes this grandiose statement of a headline, and then fails to actually make any points that support it. Sure, he makes some half-assed statements about fascists liking Lord of the Rings 100 years ago. So what? If that was his only point to support this idea, then the entire foundation of his argument rests on sand. Gamergate? I don't know much about that, but as I understand it, it started out as video game fans being legitimately pissed off at media for being giant fucking shills. Because they are. All those destroyed franchises he brought up which heartily illustrate the objective fact that every time these idiots inject identity politics into something fans love, it crashes and fucking burns? That does nothing to support your argument for fans embracing change. All Andrew Blair has done is throw out the accusations of isms and phobes yet again. Oh noes, this twat waffle called me a racist. Whatever will I do? Cringe away from the word that has no meaning anymore. Ooh. In the end, he has absolutely nothing, and that's where I'll end this one, goblins. Tell me what you thought in that handy section down below. While you're down there, join my Viridian horde by crushing those like and subscribe buttons till they squeal like Andrew Blair. I'll see you all on Monday to shit on another supposed writer. See you then. Lates.